Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into today's Industry Insights webinar. My name is Allison Kim, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator here at Latera Microsystems. Before we begin today's session presented by the amazing Sherry Capel, I'd like to remind everyone that the webinar will run for 30 minutes and will end with time for Q&A. If you have any questions, please remember to submit them into our questions panel, and we will try our best to address them all before the time is up. If we run out of time and cannot get to them all, we will follow up with you personally afterwards. Also, another note is that all of our webinars are recorded, including today's session, so you will receive a recording to reference back to, or if you want to share with colleagues. Now, for what you've all been waiting for, I'd like to kick it over to Sherry to take it away with today's topic on the 3 key accelerators for lawyer adoption of new technology. All right, Sherry, it's all yours.
Thank you, Allison, and welcome to everyone. This is certainly a topic we are all working very hard to address, and I think putting together this session today, I've certainly learned a few things, and also am so excited to share some of the things that we've seen that are indeed accelerators and proved to achieve results. I think before we begin, though, there is such a big question, and we have to answer this first. What exactly is adoption of, what does that look like? What does it mean? And equally, why is it so difficult? It feels to us always that there are more adversaries to successful adoption than there are accelerators, certainly. And so we want to talk about those two things before we then go into the very specifics about the key accelerators, the concepts that are key accelerators to adoption by lawyers of new technology. Now, always, as Allison said, we have Q&A, but I've brought forward as well a number of resources, so we'll talk about those later. So shall we begin with what precisely is adoption? What does it mean to you? And the way that we're going to talk about this is to sort of peel it apart into multiple pieces. And so at this point in time, I'm hopeful that all of you have a mobile device of some kind, maybe a tablet, maybe a phone, and you can actually bring it up and just sort of look at it and swipe through all of the applications you have on that device. And there's a method to this madness, but just go through your applications and take a look at them. And you're going to ask yourself or remind yourself of one question. How many of those applications are collecting data that give you back some kind of number? So a number might be on my airline app, how many flights I've flown in the year. Or maybe it's one of your steps app, how many steps have you taken today? Someone in a session that I delivered similar to this had a retirement countdown app, and it told them he had, X number of days until, he could retire. And I'm just wanting you to kind of go through, take a look at your app and pick out some of the ones that give you metrics and gather metrics that you either use or find interesting or the like. And I'm going to give you a second or here to do that. And then what we're going to talk about is we're going to start talking about really peeling away what those metrics do for you. So the part about adoption that becomes really intangible is that, frankly, we always think that the metrics that capture usage or capture numbers or capture, details and data like that might in fact qualify that there's adoption. But really there's more to it. Adoption is a little more intangible. It certainly feels that way. And the reason is because, yes, we have to, in adoption, take metrics and numbers to, inform us on who those users are and who those people are and what the actual numbers are saying. But it really isn't successful adoption until what happens with that data And with that information and with the decisions you're able to make from the data, you have to really look at adoption as the moment when you've successfully captured people. You've captured their emotions. You've captured the most important thing of all. You've captured their ability to change behaviors. In other words, you have altered a particularly previous state and really improved upon it, right? Let's take a couple of examples from those apps you are all flipping through. One of the metrics that I think many of us have subscribed to is the screen time that you spend on a tablet or a mobile device. Well, that is absolutely a metric that when I know I look at it, it totally changes my behavior, right? The outcome is I want to spend less time on the screen, so that data point actually allows me to adopt the fact that, guess what? I'm going to step away from that screen for a while. Similarly, if you gather up the steps that you take in a day, it's going to inform you you've done 7,800. Will that inform you enough to say, wait a minute, today I have to get in 8,000 steps? So guess what? It changes your behavior. It creates an outcome. Again, with my friend's retirement calculator, let's just say he's getting very enthused at that countdown calculator as it's less than 100 days now. So I wanted to just kind of give you that little sense of how usage metrics and how what successful adoption really means is it is a change in behavior to achieve a particular outcome. Now, this is, again, a key element to our discussion, sadly, which is that in our roles trying to get successful adoption and to change behavior, unfortunately, guess what we have? We have a number of adversaries before we have accelerators. And I just wanted to take a few minutes here to review what a couple of those are. And if any of you have been on the road shows that we on the Evangelist team have delivered across the country and across the globe, you've already heard a little bit about some of these. But let's just kind of talk about the top three key adversaries to successful adoption of new tech in a law firm. One of them is that as a community, we spend what is it? I think the recent survey was, or the recent statistic was, $3 billion in technology, legal technology, to support the efforts of our lawyers. And all of these technologies create a kind of platform that looks a little bit like this. And certainly if you are the IT person, the CIO person, if you're the one who's really on the tech side of all of this, it might not be as complex as you think, as it looks to the end user. And that's kind of my point. To the end user, it's far too complex. There are things that take them from one place to the next, and really it's very confusing. There's nothing streamlined about using all of these tools, that the user has to go to the tool in order to work with it. So that's one of our adversaries for adoption. I think the second adversary is something that is called, I knew of this law, but I certainly didn't know that it had an actual name. It's the law of the instrument. Some of you have probably heard this. It goes something to the effect that to a 5-year-old with a hammer, everything's a nail. And the idea is that, you know what? That 5-year-old knows how to use that hammer. It's an over-reliance on the hammer that allows him to just, even when he's 10, use it to kind of pound on nails. And in fact, if you all are familiar with the gentleman Maslow who talked about the hierarchy of needs, he incepted this law of the instrument. It is this preponderance of, I know how to use this tool, so while the hammer might be the thing I know how to use, I'll continue to use it, even though another tool would be better. I really do encourage you to take a look at this on the link that I provided. It's a really fascinating study. And again, it's so much of an adversary to how our lawyers work. They're familiar with, let's go do file save as, but they're not going to necessarily click a button per se. I think in any kind of tech adoption, which requires a top-down approach, one of the things that we find as our adversary is we find that partners often resist most change efforts. These are statistics from 2019, the law firm in transition research that Altman-Weil does each year. And this year's statistic says that, yes, 69% of partners resist most change efforts. So if what you have is maybe you're adopting a new DMS, maybe what you're doing is you're pushing out a new timekeeping solution. Those are the kinds of things that are going to require a kind of top-down approach. And if you don't have the partners and or the leadership in your firm advocating for that change, then indeed it becomes more of an adversary in getting the successful adoption to occur. I think one of the other things that we fight as an adversary is, and I feel that these two things are coupled, they're really one thing, is that sometimes in our organizations, there's not enough economic pain to motivate significant change. So again, we do the, the over-reliance of the familiar instrument. That could be processes, that could be a tool, but we just keep relying on the things that we know how to use, and we do it because there's not enough pain that motivates us to improve the situation. So without any further ado, let's get into what are our 3 key accelerators. Now, there are a number of resources I'm going to share at the close of our session that informed this, and yet there are so many things that we at Latera Microsystems have learned about the accelerators of adoption for lawyers, and so we're going to share those anecdotes in here as well. Basically, I've distilled it down into 3 kind of key topics, and it sounds really silly that the first accelerator is we need to focus on the initializing moment of adoption of technology. In other words, for some of us, we might think that that first step is getting the application installed, but that's like so. That's one task in about 100. To just throw a number at it. The focus on that initial first step cannot be from the perspective of the technology. It has to be from the perspective of the user. So we're going to go into that in just a second. The next one is we have to be able to select the right messenger who tells the right story, and oh, by the way, tells the right story in the right way. So we're going to decode that in a minute too. And then finally, one of the things that just consistently happens is we tend to race to the solution, and we forget actually the problem we've solved is actually the main attraction. The problem is in fact why we have the solution. So we're going to talk about that as well. So here's our crucial first step. Now, if any of you have ever looked at our Changing Lawyer publication, we have issued 2 volumes thus far. You can download them both off of our website. And in fact, at ILTACon, in just, what are we on our countdown now of about 8 days away or 10 days away, something like that, we'll have a 3rd volume. And in it, Natalie is quoted as telling us all about how when that first step begins, you have to give a lot of thought to workflow. Now, in your mind's eye, hearken back to that complexity image, right? Where we have so many applications and we have so many different repositories and we have so many different places for people to go to use our technologies. So let's think about that. If we take Natalie's great guidance, then what we have to do is we have to make it more comfortable. We have to make it so that what they don't do is they don't have to jump out here to grab that to bring it back to another spot. We have to make that workflow a lot more seamless, but most importantly, we have to fit it to the lawyer's existing workflow. Dare I say, to the law of the instrument. In other words, we have to fit it to a workflow they know. We have to fit it to a place that they are, that's very familiar to them. Now, the way that we have done this at Latera Microsystems within the drafting workflow, and this is one example I'll share, we have others, is that we have taken this focus, right? Our goal for the first step was focusing on the user and minimizing the distractions. So what we did was we said, how can we do that Let's bring all of these applications together in a streamlined workflow that brings them from creating content to reusing content to saving content and proofreading it. So we went to where the user is. These are all of the things that I need to do in my workflow, and we've connected the tools to that, simplifying it. So again, I think the key attribute here is you really have to consider that the workflow conversation is, frankly, it's not one size fits all. It depends upon what it is that is your success for adoption. In other words, if you're going to go out and say we're going to reduce clicks by 50%, then that successful adoption is when you've done that and people appreciate it and they have their hands on high above the computer, thrilled because it's so much easier. But again, it's not one size fits all. So you always have to align to where the user is and then bring the workflow design that you use, bring, the new technology in alignment with that goal and especially in alignment with the user. If the technology feels unnatural, the lawyers will not use it. Again, Natalie, it's so well said. Our second one is to be able to select the right messenger to tell the story and to tell it in the right way. So let me explain this. If you are largely the technical person, the IT director, or the CTO, or you might even be the desktop engineer, you may not be the right messenger for all technologies implemented within your firm. And that's because, again, you may not recognize the user's pain. So the idea is that what you want to do is to seek out within your organization the right messenger, a person who readily acknowledges, oh my goodness, this is the pain point, and yes, indeed, this is going to solve the problem. But when that messenger tells the story, look for some other key ingredients. That what they're doing is they're recognizing that other user. They're relating to them. There's a connection somehow. Maybe they're in the same practice group. Maybe they're a peer that is admired across the organization. Microsoft tends to call these individuals champions, and we'll get to that as well. But someone who is recognized and also makes a kind of investment in the personal or professional growth of the person they're telling this story to. So again, if you find the right messenger to tell the story, and you find the right messenger to tell the right story, someone who wants the responsibility, wants the involvement, frankly, they're gonna help you facilitate the really important key communication that has to take place. This happens to be an example of something, and I'm going to, tell you where this has all come from. But one of the ways that we do this, identify the messenger, is we provide, within our applications, we provide a number of usage statistics. And in those usage statistics, one of the pieces of data that we gather might be the Windows ID, or again, however it is you've published your information. It could even be a username. And so if what we did was we took a metric of, someone who's used the tools very, very often, and again, if you can gather that data about the applications that are new within your organization and that you want to attain successful adoption for, to find the messenger, look in the data. And I think what you'll be able to do is to make some of those connections for the rest of the firm. Now, here is, it's honestly an occupational hazard I believe we all in technology have, and that is that we solve problems all the time. We solve them quickly, we solve them fast. We don't even remember the problem once we've solved it, because why? We're already moving on to the next issue. And so one of the things that we all have to keep in mind, and again, why that messenger is so important, is that we have to remember that the problem we've eliminated is probably the most important feature of any new technology. So feature the problem. Make sure that what you do is you paint a visual picture. One of my favorite stories is when one of our clients decided that their ribbon system within Microsoft Word was absolutely a haphazard mess. And so they literally gave an interview with their CIO on a video saying, what do you think of this? And shows this, the legacy method of how all these ribbons were laid out and buttons were everywhere. And he spoke about it and he says, really, honestly, we need to streamline this. And then they brought up next the picture, the storyboard, the prototype of what the ribbon system would look like. So instead of everyone noticing the big change, what they noticed was, wow, that is different. They got to see it before they had to work with it, and they were able to paint that picture. Wow, this is a mess. I hadn't even thought of it that way. So make certain that you restate the problem. You don't, quote unquote, destroy the evidence. A while ago in New York, I did a session about measuring metrics and measuring what matters with Ellen Whitaker, and it was so amazing because one of the things that we learned in that session was that so many people who gather metrics, what they do is they never gather them until the system is up and running. They're not gathering metrics before they solve the problem. And so it becomes very hard to show, what improvements you've made. Don't destroy the evidence. Feature the problem. Don't start with featuring the solution or the product, as it were. So as I promised, as we close off here, I wanted to share with you a couple of resources, because I know that probably among Allison, I don't know if we've gotten our questions yet, but one of them from all of you has to be, what kinds of resources do I have at my disposal to help me in technology adoption within my firm? And so one of the things that you can look at, it's on the archive Allison mentioned, is at the beginning of June, we did a webinar where Judy Flournoy, the CIO of Kelly Dry & Warren, spoke about how they focused on workflows and how it led to better adoption. They focused on a kind of skunk works sort of group of people who all got together and, again, restated problems, and then everyone found solutions. And you should really listen to that webinar. It's great because Judy gives you so many great examples of how they did that there. In addition, I want to, just for a second here, I want to kind of close this down and take you out to these pages. But there is an article posted on Thomson Reuters site written by Gene O'Grady. And this particular article goes through in bullet points and just brilliance, frankly, about adoption of new technology. In fact, I love this particular part right here where she says, when it comes to lawyer training and adoption, one size does not fit all. It's imperative that you bring training or resources to the lawyers where they sit, where they gather, or into the workflows where they practice. The law of the instrument. And so I just wanted to point that one out. So again, Allison, do we have any questions?
I'm looking through and we do not, so I'm assuming that you covered everything that everyone who came to watch today's session wanted to learn about. But if you do have any questions, please make sure to submit it now.
Wonderful. So while they're doing that, Allison, I do want to point something out. I am not sure if all of you know this, but Microsoft has in fact released an actual Service Adoption Specialist certification. And I will tell you that indeed it does leverage the technologies of Microsoft Office 365 to, create the structure of it. But absolutely, they go through the entire approach, finding the tribe, finding the champions, finding the right messengers, how you tell the story, and then it's an actual certification, Allison, that you can earn. The entire certification curriculum is free. The only thing you would have to pay for is $99 if you want your actual certificate that you put on the wall. But these resources are incredible and well done and rich, and they go through these rather intangible skills that we have to develop to create successful adoption across our firms. It doesn't certainly focus on lawyers, but it can be adapted for any kind of new technology or any type of user community to which you're trying to deliver it. It's such an exceptional resource for free.
Awesome. And we actually did get one question submitted. We do have time, so Sherry, if you're okay, it is, are you aware of any firms using SCCM data to track usage for adoption purposes?
Ooh. So the one thing I am unfamiliar with is the data that is collected specifically. So SCCM data would be very useful to identify who has what applications installed, who's logging in, who's launched an application, or again, if you have a corporate store or an in-house store and the users are actually downloading and installing it, I believe absolutely that data will help point you to those people who are adopting. The thing I want to say though is that there will be more data points you have to gather beyond that, right? The idea of the metrics is it's going to give you a clue where the people are, it's going to give you a clue where the products are, and then you're going to have a second level engagement with the individuals. Go where they are, go where they sit, and find out how that is solving problems for them and the use cases that they're finding valuable. But I think so. I also think even Office 365 data has similar capacity to inform, just as the metrics that we collect through DocX tools or through Contract Companion do. They point us to the people who are using it and can be our messengers, our champions.
Perfect. And then one final question. Chris wants to know, many add-ins are used by lawyers and are related to KM Research Library. Do you have any thoughts on how to include those?
So is the content stored in add-ins to a CAM library? So this is access to a repository, perhaps. So I can think of two things. One is there usually are data metrics that are gathered when an API makes a call to a platform. So this was called from an add-in within Office, or this was called from a web page, or this was called from some other location. Usually there's data that's gathered on that kind of thing. So once again, what it will do is it will point you to who are those users. As far as the content utilization itself, I would say that's a little more complicated. One thing I can tell you about our Clause Companion solution, what we're doing is we're gathering data about which clauses are used most often and by who. Again, if your add-in solution offers those kinds of metrics, you can get that from there. And again, that's how we're approaching it within our tool.
Great. And then those were all the questions we have. We do get one friendly comment. Dora says, Sherry rocks.
And thank you. Go ahead, Alice.
You're about to take it away. I was just going to mention that you can see all of our past and upcoming webinars on our website under our resources tab at latera.com/webinars, which the next one will be a spotlight on a look at server comparison.
Excellent. And then don't forget, you all can come and see us at ILTACon. You've got now, a whole two booths to visit us at. And we will see you at either booth 419 or booth 423. Do know that if you go to the links where we have this on our websites, what you can do is schedule a meeting with us. We would love to sit down and talk with you about new technology adoption and other things.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Sherry, for presenting.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
All right. You too. Bye.